bells are ringing, Edith is kissing in public, Mary is scolding Carson. That's just some of what we saw when season 4 of Downton Abbey was finally, and I repeat, finally unveiled to American audiences Sunday night. Joining me today to discuss the return of the Upstairs Downstairs drama is TV critic Mary McNamara.
Hi.
And TV reporter Meredith Blake from New York.
Live from New York.
And Meredith is also our Downton Abbey recapper, so she'll have plenty to say, I think. And for you who are joining us, if you want to join in on the conversation, use the hashtag AskLATimes, and we'll try to get to you. We want to hear everything you think about yesterday's episode. So I don't even know where to start. And I feel like the first thing we should discuss is the wait for this.
Oh, the wait.
The wait.
How everybody's been desperately anticipating the wait.
The wait. Like people like on Facebook and Twitter have been like counting down the days.
I know.
And has it been hard for you? I mean, what do you think of the delay we get between the UK?
Oh, because they get to see it first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's also really funny considering the demographic of the show. I mean, like this kind of, when is it happening? Are we there yet? You link that to like a younger, like more sci-fi, kind of thing. And so it's like all these like middle-aged people going, I need my Downton Abbey. And yeah, I think it is, and they're finally, these people are finally like now on Facebook and maybe Twitter, and they're like, no spoilers, no spoilers. It's so funny. But the delay between, isn't it shorter than it was last year between the UK and here, or not?
I think it's exactly the same.
It's Sherlock that's shorter this time around. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it is really hard, but it is, people are dying to know.
What do you think, Meredith? I mean, do you like it this way? Because I feel like my DVR is at capacity.
Yes.
In the fall with Good Wife and Walking Dead. I mean, what do you think of it?
I feel exactly the same way, because I think last season I felt more acutely the wait until January, but this year I sort of felt like, and you have to kind of avert your eyes when you're on the internet in case you read something from one of the UK papers, but I actually found it sort of a relief this time around, that just when you're finally hitting a lull in the TV season, there's something new to watch and to devote your attention to.
That was the hardest part, is not looking at everything.
Yeah, I remember 2 years ago we were actually in London at Christmas, and we had this huge like moral dilemma, which is that do we watch the season finale of Downton Abbey before we saw the beginning of it, And it was the one where Matthew asks Mary to marry him, and so we actually did watch it. That's because we couldn't stand it, because it's like over there, it's a huge deal. I mean, TV is just such a huge deal over in the UK, but Downton Abbey and Doctor Who and those Christmas specials are so huge. It was just like you felt like you couldn't fully participate in a British Christmas if you didn't watch this television show. It's very funny.
Right. Very exciting. Well, Sunday's episode finally presented 2 hours worth of mourning, basically. Lots of depression. Let's talk about Lady Mary. And I mean, it's 6 months after Matthew Crawley's death. And were you mourning the death of Matthew?
I was not mourning the death of Matthew. I was very happy to see Matthew go. I mean, not that Dan Stevens isn't a wonderful actor, not that Matthew wasn't an appealing character, but he was such a drag on the narrative, because he just, like, anytime there was a problem, he'd inherit a bunch of money. Oh, another inheritance.
Like that problem.
Or like,
want it.
He's paralyzed. No, he's not. I mean, it was just like, he was like the miraculous, fixture of any kind of problem that happened. And he also, because of that, he overshadowed, in my mind, Lady Mary and then the Dowager Countess. I mean, the best things about the first season of the show was the tension between the old and the new ways, which was best embodied by those two characters. But as Mary got all soft and mushy, and then the Dowager Countess got all soft and mushy, you had less of those wonderful moments where you see the clash between the times. And I feel like now the attention is, Lady Mary is the best character on Downton Abbey, and so now we get to see her, not all doughy-eyed and, happy. Because it sounds terrible, but in a drama, your main characters shouldn't be like happy all the time. You have to have them fighting for something, and so I'm very happy that he's gone, and I was very happy with the first episode.
Well, as a girl that likes the happily ever afters, I have to say. I, too, was sort of relieved by this turn of events. Meredith, how did you take Matthew's death?
I see it both ways because I do see what you're saying, Mary, about him kind of being a drag, and he is not. I mean, Dan Stevens is great, but his character is not as interesting as, say, the Dowager Countess or Lady Mary. He's a little bit of a drip, dare we say? Is it terrible to say that? But I don't think that his departure has necessarily solved the magical solution problem. I think that you're still seeing some of it in last night's episode of these kind of Deus Ex Machina solutions. Right. You see it with the letter from Matthew, and it's a problem that's still there, and I think, if anything, it's more glaring in some ways without Matthew being there.
Mm-hmm. And some people were sort of like peeved. They felt there was more mourning for Matthew than there was for Sybil.
Well, yes. There was more mourning for Matthew than there was Sybil, which was kind of weird. But then you didn't see most of it because it's like there on camera there wasn't, because we went from, 6 months, and really then the episode was all about, get it together, Lady Mary. I mean, everybody except for her dad, who wanted to keep control of Downton. Everybody was like kind of enough already, kind of thing. So it was like more off-camera grieving. But yeah, I mean, it was very funny when Lord Grantham is lecturing Tom about like how awful it must be to lose somebody. It's like, have you like forgotten already? It's like that your own daughter died. It was kind of weird. But there is like kind of that move on, because like O'Brien left and like there was no conversation. I mean, here's this huge character who like had the trust of Elizabeth McGovern's character, who like had the huge linchpin of a lot of the plot points, and she's gone, and it's just like, oh well, what a pain, it's like on to the next thing.
I just hope this doesn't mean the end of O'Brien's bangs on Twitter, because that's a great Twitter account. And she was tweeting about last night's episode too, so that was great.
Oh, that is funny.
Yes,
that is funny. Well, I do think what Meredith was saying about like the the neatly tied up endings. I mean, I think one of the, and I've had a huge problem with it since season 2, is that it seems like Julian Fellowes is so in love with his characters that he won't let them like go for 5 minutes being bad or making bad decisions or being uncomfortable. And I think that that's a problem. And I think that that's what happened with Matthew. Was he started off as being like, he came to Downton very dismissive of the old ways, but then, and that was fun to watch, but then he quickly was just like, oh yes, this is Wonderland, and I will embrace it. And I hope that, I feel like that the show is at its strongest when it allows these characters to be, to be both admirable and not necessarily, beautiful in their actions, and I hope that he does more of that. And he does do, having seen, I think I've seen 4 episodes, there is a more of a willingness to go darker, to show like that not everybody is, wonderful.
We talk a lot about the upstairs drama, but what do you make of the downstairs storylines? I mean, are you happy where things are going? We have this Daisy, like, love triangle thing, and, I mean, what do you think, since Anna and Bates have, like, turned a new chapter? Although there's some stuff that will come up there, but, I mean, what do you make of what's going on downstairs?
Well, I do think that there is more of attention to what's going on upstairs because it's prettier. I mean, I think that the number one characteristic of Downton Abbey is that it's so beautiful, and I think that's why people love it. It's like you go to this very different place. It's really fun to be there. There's none of the pesky like realities of like inequality, because of course everyone at Downton is equal. So downstairs, I mean, the Bates marriage, I can tell you, I don't think without spoil, is going to suffer even more pressure because they're not allowed to have 5 happy minutes together. And
but they send Valentine cards to each
other. And that's really sweet. Yeah. And you do see, like, Molesley. Molesley has a really great character, where he's trying to get a new job, and he's a really great character because he's kind of a whinger, and it's like you want to shake him and say. And then Carson has his little sideline story, and I love Carson, and I love that scene with Lady Mary and Carson where she's like, I'm sure it is my fault as well. Where she's like admonishing him, but not really. What do you think, Meredith? What do you think of the downstairs action on Downton?
I do think you're right that it's always a little more fun to be upstairs, and sometimes I feel like you can tell that Julian Fellowes likes being upstairs more than he likes being downstairs. Carson and Hughes have a wonderful relationship, and it's fun to see that continually develop. Especially last night's episode, she's sort of, forges this reconciliation between him and the other cheerful Charlie.
Right.
But I do think, especially with Daisy and the kind of never-ending love triangle with Jimmy and Ivy and Alfred, that seems it's wearing a little thin, I think. I think he needs to find some new material downstairs. And I'm hoping maybe with the arrival of a new nanny in upcoming episodes, I don't know, I'm sort of speculating, but I think there's potential for some more excitement down there.
Right.
Well, and a big character in yesterday's episode was the food mixer. The
magic bullet.
Yes. Can we talk about, what do you think of how we keep getting these reminders about how the times are changing? And I think, that aside, we kept getting, verbal reminders about how the world is changing.
Yes.
What do you make of these cues that keep being drilled into us?
Well, I think, it also, it's the same issue as why he stays in the upstairs, which is that, he doesn't want anybody to be uncomfortable while watching Downton. And the fact of the matter is, life was pretty ghastly, especially for some of these servants. And, and they didn't have an education. They really didn't have a future. You see that with Molesley. It's like he loses his job and it's like he can't find another one. And so it's much easier to sort of symbolize the changing times with technology than it is to address the fact that this is an oppressed people. These are disenfranchised people, and those people that you're admiring, old Lady Mary and the Dowager Countess, are the ones oppressing them, and who would rather see this huge echoing cavern of a building maintained, and they're more worried about that future than the future of a whole race of people. And so if you have to, or if you're forced to think about that, then it's harder to like the people upstairs. So Fellows very consciously veers away from that. And so you even have things like the Irish question. Is Tom even Irish anymore? He went from being a bomb throwing incendiary to now he's walking, he's the country squire, and he has no problem with that, and he's come to see that, oh, these people aren't so bad, which as an Irishman, I'm sitting here going, they are that bad. They are totally oppressing an entire nation. So I think that's so he keeps trying to say times are changing in a in this kind of very pretty-fied way.
And I love that farming is getting so much attention on TV. First we had Rick Grimes, and now Mary's going to this check on livestock and stuff.
James Harriet.
Yeah, it's really weird.
It's so funny. Yeah. What do you think? What do you hear from your side, Meredith? Jump in this conversation.
I think it is funny how he gets you to root for these rich people. Even last night, you're like, yes, I really want Mary to get all of the money, and it's she's still going to be just fine, And then the next big plot point is obviously going to be how does she keep the money without paying? How does she pay off the taxes? And it becomes this weird, bizarre tax accounting show sometimes. And you're rooting for these people not to pay their death duties. I think they talked about death duties 6 times last night.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm all for it, but I'm all for it fictionally. Let's put it that way.
Well, that's the thing. It's politically, we know that Downton has to go. Because Downton is basic. It's a serf. This is a serfdom. It's a little, and that. That's a terrible economic and social order, and so it does have to go. And so I've had that issue with Downton Abbey, from the beginning, which is that, and also the equality. When the servants just go walking up into the bedrooms and bring their problems, and you're just going, if you go back and you watch Upstairs, Downstairs, Mr. Hudson would have had a heart attack. He would have been
Well, I heard there's a UCI course or something where they kind of use this to say what's correct and what isn't. So maybe we should take that course.
Yes, well, none of it's correct.
Julian Fellows should. Maybe.
It's I just feel even if you look back at Dorothy Sayers, the Lord Peter Wimsey series, it's which is the same time period, and there's a very intimate relationship between the detective and his manservant, but there are just Bunter would have there are things you just don't do. There are things you just don't say. There are things you don't allow other people to say, and it's just crazy the way that they just blur that. But again, they have to do it to be resonant with the modern day audiences, because how much could you like Lady Mary? It was hard enough in that scene where she's dressing down Carson, even though she's doing it in the nicest way possible. But what if she hadn't apologized? You'd be like,
What a,
you know,
yeah.
you can't say that word, but you know what
a bee.
Yes, exactly. What a meanie.
Well, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, and there's that scene where Carson says to Mosley, you've been here for 6 months, and it's like this poor guy doesn't have a job because Matthew's dead, and we're supposed to think that he's imposing on his lordship, which is crazy. It's like you realize how this system was kind of terrible to all involved, but also that they did need it. Mosley's going to be spreading tar otherwise, so we'll see how that works out.
Well, in 4 seasons in, I mean, was it worth the wait? Do you feel like, I mean, you've been critical of the show before. Do you feel like you're finally, like, okay with it? I mean, Meredith, what do you make of its evolution? I mean, you said in your recap that not much has changed in Downton Abbey, so I guess let's talk about where we stand now.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm cautiously optimistic that things will get exciting in the season ahead. I was a little worried after last night's episode, just based on kind of the feeling that a lot of things were sort of repeating themselves, namely the magical piece of paper that washes away all of the inheritance problems. Thomas is scheming; he's doing the same things. Cora is hiring terrible people all over again. She has sort of very bad. She's a bad judge of character, that one. It does feel like these things are kind of happening, and Daisy 10 years later is kind of still like, still loves Lauren.
Don't hate on Daisy.
I love Daisy, don't get me wrong.
Daisy,
but it's like,
Daisy is the Ruby of Downton Abbey. Do you remember
Yes.
Ruby on Upstairs, Downstairs? There
Yes.
has to be that kitchen maid.
Yes.
That's like, but she at least, because doesn't she have an inheritance coming her own self?
That's right.
Her father-in-law, who seems to be like kind of an interesting character.
She's supposed to inherit the
feel
farm.
Yes.
Or farms, yeah.
Maybe
And then
Mary
she
can help her out.
Yes.
Yeah, they can go into a slow grow, like Alice Waters kind of thing. Baby lettuce.
Right.
But I felt, when I was watching it, I was asking myself, is this better? Are things better, or have I just been beaten into submission by Downton Abbey? Because I mean, yes, everything that Meredith says is true. I'm glad we at least have moved past the, what will become of Downton? Do we have enough money? Because I was getting really tired of that. And I feel like if they stay focused on Mary's character, if, the Dowager Countess, when she comes in and when you let Maggie Smith do anything, there is no better television happening. So, to see her talking to her granddaughter and realize that here's a woman who's seen so much change in her lifetime and why she's the way she is and why, she's made the choices that she, even glimpses of that will keep me watching Downton until, I don't know what would happen if she, God forbid, if Maggie decided she was done. I think the show would be over.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think, Meredith? I mean, they couldn't do it without her.
I agree. I don't think. Just let me have some tea here quickly. I don't think you'd have a show without her. I mean, that's like Mad Men without Don Draper. You couldn't have it without the Dowager Countess.
Yeah. Well, and what do we make of Lady Edith and what's going on with her? She finally has a man who's willing to move to Germany.
I guess.
To get a divorce.
I just think
it's what every girl wants.
It's a bad idea to date your editor.
Right.
Voice from the future. Stay away from the married editors.
Say that louder here, yeah.
I think that whole storyline just makes me laugh every time I think about it, because it's like, or his wife in the asylum, and you're just like, what is this?
It's like Jane Eyre. Yeah.
It's like, that's another thing. I mean, it's like, that's what makes me mad about Fellows. It's like, he couldn't just have her fall in love with a married guy, He had to have her fall in love with a married guy, wife in the asylum.
Right.
So, is that you?
Or do you need to evacuate, Meredith?
Was that you?
I'm confused.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, at least she's getting a nice wardrobe.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes,
that
she
green
looks fabulous.
dress, so good.
She looks fabulous.
I just don't see this ending well, as much as I'd like it to.
One of the things that just kill me about, again, you have this beautiful actress playing this woman who's supposed to be not attractive, and so they did sort of go out of their way to make her look terrible and put her in those horrible situations. So I'm glad to see, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with Lady Edith. So like, let's let the middle child shine for a minute.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Are you more a Lady Edith or a Lady Mary? I'm a middle child, so I identify most with Lady
I'm
Edith.
a Lady Sybil, so I'm dead. I married the Irish chauffeur.
Meredith?
Which
sister are you?
I'm a middle sister. So I guess I'm more of an Edith.
Okay. Interesting. And I have to say, because I didn't even notice this until Meredith brought it up in her recap, but we lost the image of the dog's rear end in the opening credits. This is a travesty. Did you notice this?
I didn't. See, I don't watch it in real time. I watch the screeners, so it's like I miss everything. Like I miss the introduction and I miss all that stuff.
This can't be the end of the dog, right?
I think it'll be back. Everyone loves the dog behind.
You can't get rid of
except
the
for
dog.
Mary.
You can't get rid of the dog. Well, we have lots of interesting stuff coming up ahead that we can't even like spoil for you right now because you'll all like send us mean tweets. But
exactly.
There's some interesting storylines coming up in both upstairs and downstairs. So I think that's where we're gonna end it today. I hope you guys join us next week. I think we're doing Sherlock.
Because next week on Sunday we get Downton Abbey and then Sherlock, which is like unheard of. There are going to be 2 masterpieces, and we're gone. Are we gone?
Okay.
Okay. So you have to. So you have to turn into PBS next Sunday to get the double whammy of Downton Abbey and Sherlock. So we'll be talking about Sherlock next week.
Yes. So
are you going to join us, Meredith, to talk about Sherlock?
I sure will.
Yay!
Cheerio.
Cheerio.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope to see you next week.